The track is hot and it's time for engines to roar. Welcome back to F1 Brake Check, the only podcast with lots of content and zero shame. On today's episode, we will have an all-new biography of one of the greatest to ever pilot a race car. We'll talk the latest news and preview the action from the Swiss Alps and the Austrian Grand Prix. So settle back and grab a pint. F1 Brake Check is foot to the floor.
Welcome. You are listening to F1 Brake Check, the epic podcast for all things Formula One, where we discuss technology, history, news, and perspective. With your hosts, Scott Vick and Corey Broom.
We're back with F1 Brake Check. My name is Scott Vick. I am one of your intrepid hosts, and with me, as always, is my brother in arms, my ride or die, my pundit for life, Mr. Corey Broom. Corey, how you doing this week, sir?
Good. I'm excited for the F1 movie.
Yeah. So we are recording this on Tuesday, June the 24th, and the F1 movie will be dropping this weekend, and Corey and I already have our tickets for Friday night to go see it, and we will be bringing you a special edition to sometime this weekend with our review of the movie, so be on the lookout for that, folks.
How about you? How's your week?
It's already been chaos, so I'm already ready for it to be over with.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into our biography for this week. Today, we're winding back the clocks and diving into the story of a man who wasn't just a champion, but an era-defining figure. A gentleman racer with a cheeky grin, a polished British accent, and a mustache so iconic it should have had its own racing license. He was suave, relentless, and fiercely determined. This is the dramatic tale of Graham Hill, the only man in history to win the Triple Crown of Motorsport, the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indianapolis 500, and the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Norman Graham Hill was born on February 15th, 1929, in Hampstead, London. Unlike many of today's drivers who start racing before they can spell podium, Hill came to the sport late. He didn't even get a driver's license until he was 24. And yet, like any good underdog story, he made up for lost time with a burning intensity that turned him from mechanic to motor racing royalty. Hill wasn't born into motorsport or with a silver spoon. He worked as a mechanic at Team Lotus, pestering Colin Chapman until he got a chance to take a drive. And when he did, he didn't just half-ass it, he attacked. He so impressed Chapman that Hill made his Formula One debut in 1958, age 29, a full decade older than most of his rookie competitors. If there was ever a kingdom Graham Hill ruled over, it was the narrow, winding streets of Monte Carlo. Between 1963 and 1969, Hill conquered the Monaco Grand Prix 5 times, earning him the nickname Mr. Monaco. That's no small feat. The twisting turns of Monaco have humbled the best, Senna, Schumacher, and even modern kings like Hamilton and Leclerc. But Hill danced through those barriers with the precision of a ballerina. His 1965 drive in particular is the stuff of legends, slicing through traffic, brushing against Armco barriers, yet never losing rhythm, never losing sight of the prize. At a time when F1 cars had more horsepower than safety features, Hill's mastery of the track bordered on madness or genius. There's a fine line there. In 1962, driving for BRM, Hill won his first world championship. The season was a dogfight between him and Jim Clark, another British icon, and it went down to the wire in South Africa. Clark's car gave up on him in the closing lap, and Hill's pounced. Title sealed, champagne popped. He claimed his second crown in 1968 with Lotus under tragic circumstances. His teammate and friend Jim Clark had died earlier that year in a Formula 2 race. Hill took up the team leader mantle and drove with the spirit of two men. He won 4 races that season, including the Monaco Grand Prix, and secured the title in Mexico City. It was heroic, emotional, and utterly unforgettable. Now let's talk royalty. Winning a championship is impressive. Winning Monaco is iconic. But only one man in the long, wild history of motorsports has ever won the Triple Crown. As we already know, that man was Graham Hill. In 1966, he crossed the yard of bricks first at the Indianapolis 500, on his debut no less. He wasn't the fastest, but he was the smartest, managing his pace and car perfectly while the others fell by the wayside. It was a victory born of cunning as much as courage. Then in 1972, at the ripe age of 43, When most drivers were thinking about retirement homes, not pit stops, Hill won the 24 Hours of Le Mans with Henry Pescarola in a mantra. It was his final jewel in his Triple Crown, and it's a feat that no other driver has ever matched. Hill wasn't just a driver, he was a personality, charming, witty, and endlessly quotable. He appeared on talk shows, dined with royalty, and even lent his voice to commercials. He once quipped, "I'm an artist, the track is my canvas, and the car is my brush." No one, with the possible exception of Senna, painted a Monaco masterpiece quite like Hill. In the 1970s, he formed his own F1 team, Embassy Hill. It was bold, ambitious, a team run by racers for racers. And though results were modest, the dream was pure. Tragically, that dream ended far too soon. On November 29th, 1975, Graham Hill died in a plane crash returning from testing in France. He was piloting the aircraft himself. Also on board were members of his team, including promising young driver Tony Briss. The loss sent shockwaves through the racing world. The legends don't fade with time, they echo. If you walk the hallowed grounds of places like Silverstone and Monza, sometimes you can hear the ghosts whispering. Hill's legacy lived on not just in the record books, but in the DNA of motorsports itself, and in his son, Damon Hill, who carried the family name to championship glory in 1996, making them the first father-son duo to win the F1 driver's title. He was dashing, daring, and deeply human. Graham Hill raced not just with skill, but with style. He drove as if the track owed him something, and by the end, it did. Respect, glory, immortality. Graham Hill wasn't just a driver, he was a legend on wheels.
As you're going through this, I was looking through all of our show notes from the very beginning, because I'm surprised we haven't done a biography on Graham Hill before. For some reason, I thought we had, so I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I love Graham Hill. I love the story too. His biography was fantastic.
Yeah, and he was one of those true characters of the sport too. I mean, yes, we've done we've done a number of biographies on a number of his contemporaries. So we've already done, we already did one on Phil Hill, with the American who raced at the same time, and we also did one on Jimmy Clark last season. But it was Graham Hill was always one of those characters that I just really felt like I needed to do him justice. And so it took me a while. It took me several passes at writing the biography to finally get it where I wanted it to be, in such a way that I thought it would honor the man. Because I really didn't know who Graham Hill was when I first started watching Formula One, because he had passed away. When he passed away, I was only 3 years old. But when Damon, his son, started racing for Brabham in the late 80s, I think he his first race was for Brabham, I think in 89, or maybe it was 90. But they talked about Damon, and they talked about his father, being a former world champion. And then that's when I went back and I found some books about Graham Hill and started learning about the man and everything. And he was, not only was he a undeniably fast, undeniably talented, but he was also a real character. Some of the practical jokes and some of the shenanigans that those guys were able to get into back in those days is just the stuff of legend and stuff. Right. And so I'm not going to go into them on this show, because they've already been documented way better than anything that I could ever do. I couldn't do justice to it. But if you get a chance, I forget the name of the book. I'll make sure I add it. I'll make sure I post it on social media. The name of there's a really, really good biography about Graham Hill that takes and details a lot of those moments and stuff. And I'll post that so that everybody can go read it. It's just, it's fantastic reading if you can find a copy of it.
Awesome, man. Yeah, nice.
All right, so Stump the Pundit, this is taking another week off. So we're going to just jump right into news and preview the action from this weekend at Austria. So first and foremost, at this point in the season, with everything that has gone on, George Russell still doesn't have a contract extension in hand from Mercedes. what the hell is going on here? Why has this not happened? George has looked every bit he has looked every bit of a leader for Mercedes. He's been fast, he's won races, he's won poles. He's done, lots and lots of good things. Why has Mercedes not given him a contract extension? Go.
Max Verstappen. Toto wants Max. He doesn't make really any issue with that either. He being Toto. You can look at Red Bull management. Where Red Bull has always backed Max, always 100%, no matter if he's in the wrong or whatever, they've always backed Max. Whereas now, Helmut Marko, Christian still is supporting him for the most part, at least publicly. But Helmut actually publicly didn't chastise him, but he didn't he didn't mince words when talking about Verstappen when he crashed into Russell. So, you can take that and say, well, maybe that was just a one-off, or, it's maybe starting to look like possibly that we may be having a change at Red Bull, that maybe they know that Max is very unhappy and he's ready to leave, maybe going to Mercedes.
Okay, so my thoughts is that, in all honesty, I don't think Max is going anywhere. At least he's not next year. So I really think that Max is going to be at Red Bull for one more year. I think he's going to try to see, because first of all, although we're not privy to all of the, the clauses in his contract that would allow him to escape from Red Bull early, but the fact that we haven't heard more, I mean, we've heard some rumblings, we've heard some things, Max and Toto were talking in the paddock at, Barcelona, before, and, Toto didn't come down as hard on Max after Canada, or I'm sorry, after, right. Barcelona as he would have in the past and everything. But I think we would have heard more rumblings about, yes, it's going to happen, with all signs of, and I don't think it's going to happen. I really think that he's already resigned himself, that he's going to see how well Red Bull gets on with the car development for next season. Also, and I have nothing to base this on, I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves, if you will. Mm-hmm. I really think, because he is going to have insider knowledge, if for lack of a better term, into how the Ford power unit is developing. And I got a sneaking suspicion he has seen something in the Ford that says it's going to be that Ford's return to F1 next year is going to be a really, really strong contender. And I have a sneaking suspicion that that's what he's holding on for. Yeah. And so at the very least, he's going to excise his options and stay with Red Bull for one more season. But the thing is, though, is that if he's going to do that, he needs to make it very clear now, so that way somebody, so that George should be getting a contract extension, or at the very least, if Toto doesn't think that he's still going to be able to get Max, as soon as he knows even there's even a glimmer of a hope, he needs to tell George, go find another seat, go talk to Red Bull if you want to go over there and race for them, see where else you can land, but go find a seat now. And so that way he's not the last person standing when the music stops. Right. Because George, of any of the drivers on the grid right now who don't have a contract at the end of this season, George is the one who deserves a seat more than anybody else, period, full stop.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, man, to see, because, there's rumors that Russell has talked to Red Bull, and, some of the moves that Red Bull's taking is interesting as well, like promoting, I forget who was it that they promoted, or that they were looking at trying to promote.
Okay, so you're talking about Arvid Lindblad, who is apparently, and you mentioned him because apparently this last week he got to drive, I believe it was the 23 AlphaTauri TW03, I think that's the right designation. If it's not, let me know down in the comments. And tell me that I'm an idiot. But yes, so it was a heavily disguised AlphaTauri, but it was a previous generation car that he took and he got in order to take and really get him acclimated to the Formula One and everything. They've already started testing him, and putting him into the car. He had a couple of spins during testing, but otherwise, apparently, he really impressed everyone with his pace. And it's one of those things that maybe they might be looking at, because again, like we talked about 2 weeks ago when he first got his super license, you and I talked about it here on the show about how there's a lot of people that's had this kid's name circled for a very, very long time who say he's, the next, he is, another one of those once in a generational talents, and that this kid is really something else. So we'll see about that. But yes, I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces right now. But right now, the piece that probably matters the most of just about anybody, though, is George Russell, because it's like he really needs to be the one. If there's really any one driver that should be dictating the way the driver market looks for the remainder of the season, it should be him. He should be the one getting to dictate, okay, I'm going to be the first one. I'm going to take my choice of seats and everybody else can have what's left.
Yeah. Oh, agreed. Plus, I mean, he has all the he has the experience, plus he has the handling of a team like Mercedes that's top of the grid, and all the pressures that are needing to be dealt with as well. So yeah, most definitely. I'm sure that if there isn't a seat will be made for George if he is indeed left out of Mercedes. So we'll see.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, but that also begs the question that Antonelli is also only on a 1-year contract, and he doesn't have a contract at the end of 2025 either. So my question is where is his contract extension? The kid has already proven, that the faith that Toto and the rest of Mercedes put into him was well-founded. And regardless of what they decide to do with George, Kimi should already have his contract extension, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are going to come back and say, hey, at the beginning of the season and during the off season, you guys were dogging on him. But if anybody will go back and listen to the last 2 or 3 episodes, you and I have done nothing but say, okay, we're eating crow. We're singing his praises. We were wrong. The kid is something else.
Yeah.
And with that being said, yes, I think he should already have a contract extension in hand.
Yeah. No, yeah, they're probably waiting. I would bet that they're probably waiting for the silly season to start, get him a few more races under his belt. So, and also he'll be able to really see a little bit more on how he handles more pressure and more stress. So maybe it's just a waiting game because it's still a little bit early for the contracts, I would say. Maybe a little bit closer to the end of the season, but we'll see. But somebody like George, to your point, should already have a contract if he truly is the number one, and they're seeing him to be the number one moving forward.
Yes, absolutely. It's right now, I'm really of the opinion that trying to go after Max right now, where he's still fairly firmly ensconced at Red Bull, I think is just a little too much pie in the sky, and that they really need to give up on that idea. And it's like George has been the rock. Yes, he's made a couple mistakes. Yes, it's Singapore, 2 years ago, I forget which race it was last season where he took in the very end of the race. He ends up tanking the car, putting the car on its side, literally on its side, so but this year he has, now that he's really the de facto number one, he has really grabbed a hold of the reins and he's really done an amazing job for not Red Bull, if it's, pardon my French, he has really done an amazing job for Mercedes, and he's helped develop that car that's made it much closer to of a contender than it has been for the last few years. And I think that the team need to reward him for all of that hard work and the diligence that he has shown for the team. Now they need to take and show him some love.
Yeah. Yeah, again, he picked up the reins after Hamilton left, and like you said,
Mm-hmm.
he has really performed really well. Because before he was tapped on the shoulder to become number one, he was making a lot of mistakes, crashing a lot. He was just, he would get super nervous when people were behind him. He just was not going to be that number one until he was tapped on the shoulder, and he really came up to play.
Yeah, he really did. So, we talked about Antonelli just a minute ago about, but the thing is, though, is that we've also got another really great piece of news. Well, actually, two things. One, that after his absolutely brilliant overtake in the beginning of the Canadian Grand Prix, where he overtook Oscar Piastri and was able to hang on to it to get his first podium in F1, his mom basically grounded him and banned him from having any kind, from going out and partying after his after his first podium, with good reason, because he
Yeah.
still had to finish up his school exams in order to be able to graduate from high school. But he was able to successfully pass all of his exams, and he is now a graduate. So congratulations, Kimmy.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Now it's time to get on with the work, and welcome to the big time. So congratulations on that. Okay, so we got another little the ongoing story of Cadillac, and as they ramp up their F1 program for being on the grid next season. There's still a lot of speculation about who is going to be driving for Cadillac. I knew we a couple weeks ago we talked about that it looked like it was going to be, a fairly done deal that signs or not signs. It was a very pretty solid bet that Sergio Perez was going to be in one of those Cadillac seats. But now Cadillac has said, we are in no hurry to decide on our drivers. We are not going to make any kind of rush decision. But now it's looking like it's a four-way battle between Checo, Valtteri Bottas, Mick Schumacher, and Joe Granu. Now, my money is on Bottas and Schumacher.
That would be a good
And
pick.
that would be a very good pick. I think that would be a very good pick for Cadillac, because you would have a really great mix of experience and youth. And in Mick Schumacher, I've always said that he had more untapped talent, and he just never had the equipment or the support that he needed to ever be comfortable enough. But the fact that he won championships at the F2 and F3 level in only his second try out both times, and he's also, multi-time kart champion and things like that. He has the talent to be a top level driver. He's just never been given the opportunity or the equipment in F1. But that's I didn't really intend to talk too much about Mick this time. What I wanted to talk about, did you see Valtteri Bottas's social media post?
I've seen several, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So the one that I saw that I thought was just absolutely brilliant was where he's walking up to a Cadillac SUV and someone says, "Hey, it's a Cadillac." And he looks at it and he goes, "Man, it looks really nice. It really, really great car and everything. Oh, look. And it has two open seats," which I just thought was absolutely brilliant, which
Yeah.
makes me think that I think that Bottas may be zeroing in on getting one of those seats that,
I hope
the
so.
Cadillac, and I really do hope so. I think that of all of the drivers that are not currently in Formula One, that have previously been had a seat with one of the teams who are not in the sport right now, that I've always said that Bottas was like top of the list
Yeah.
of available drivers. I mean, he's been, the reserve driver for Mercedes. He's been the reserve driver for McLaren, and he's done a lot of work with all the other teams. He's done everything that he has needed to do in order to stay ingrained in the sport and ingrained in people's minds that putting him in one of those Cadillac seats, I think would be the absolute smartest thing that Cadillac could possibly do.
I don't really see anybody else. I mean, Checo would be a good choice, but I think he would be a good second choice to Valtteri. Valtteri
Yes.
has, I mean, he's been in a top tier team for a very long time in his career. He's won poles, he's won races. He still has the fastest lap on a couple of tracks. So he definitely should be the one.
I totally agree. And like I said before, though, I really do think that the pairing of him with his experience and mixed raw talent, I think would be the perfect pairing for Cadillac. I think that Bottas would assist greatly in helping develop the car, especially as they're trying to get on the grid for, next year and everything. I think that he would provide nothing but, net positive input in order to help develop the car, especially as they start, ramping up the simulator and everything before the car's even ready to, turn a wheel in anger and everything. He would already be, hopefully they would already have him on the simulator. He could already start putting input into it to say, okay, this needs to be changed, or, I mean, even though I know that the steering wheels and a lot of the controls and everything are all very driver specific, there are certain parts of it that are, is shared between, between both drivers and everything. And he would be able to take and be the one to take and say, okay, this, like, these little things need to change, because a lot of these things, especially like with steering wheels, because they are so personalized in the way that they're set up and everything, that they need they need ramp up time. They need lead time in order to take and be able to take and truly, it's one thing for a driver to sub in and he's using somebody else's wheel and he just has to learn how to deal with the wheel. But when you are the number one driver at a team, the wheel is basically tailored to you, to the way that you want the wheel to be set up. But in order to do that, like I said, it requires some lead time in order to take and be able to develop and actually implement these different, customizations and everything. And the sooner that they can take and get the drivers in, I think the better. So I definitely hope that Cadillac in their own interest will, even though they said that they're not making any rush decision or anything, I think it would really behoove them to have a decision in place no later than the summer break.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Valtteri, so I'm really pulling for him. And Mick too. I really think that Mick deserves a true shot, because what he had at Haas was not at least in my opinion, I don't think it was a true legitimate shot.
Now, one of the things that a lot of people have said, though, is that because Ferrari's going to be providing power units for Cadillac until the Cadillac power unit itself is ready in 2028, 2 years from now. For those 2 years, there's a lot of people, though, that have said that Zhou Guanyu, because he is one of the Ferrari reserve drivers and one of the test drivers for him and everything, that he does still have an outside chance. But I don't know. I'm really kind of interested. I would really, if they did take him as one of the drivers, it would not surprise me. But at the same time, I don't, as much as I like Joe, as much as I think he's, I don't think he got nearly enough credit for his time at Sauber. But at the same time, when you look at the drivers that they're looking at as possible, to slot into that car, I still put him third or fourth on the list. And I think that they would be much better served by going with the pairing that we've already talked about.
Right. Yeah. Completely agree.
Yeah. All right. So we had this week, and one of the coolest things that I have seen in a very long time is James Vowles, head of Williams, got to take to the track this week in Nigel Mansell's championship winning FW14B, which I thought was just one of the coolest things. First of all, being the head of being the head of Williams and everything, it comes with some perks, and that's a pretty damn cool perk.
Yeah.
But there is also more behind it as well, in the fact that Vowles, along with their F1 Academy driver Leah Block, and there was one other person, and Nigel Mansell, all four will be taking and getting into the FW14B and throwing it up the hill at Goodwood at the end of the month. So I always love Goodwood anyway, because it's always you get to see just some absolutely incredible cars, getting to fly up, the up the hill and everything. But I think this is just going to be such a cool thing to get to see, and I think for the job that James has done
Yeah.
at Williams since he's come over from Mercedes, I think it's well deserved. I think it's a well deserved perk to be able to take and get to climb into the car and fly it up the hill.
And his contract extension, like you were saying, I think his
Yes.
contract extension is just it's very well deserved.
As Corey just mentioned, we also got the news this week that James has been given a long-term contract extension to stay at Williams as the head over there, which I think is an absolutely probably one of the smartest things that Williams could have done in locking him down. Because James Val, for those of you who might not be as familiar with him, because now that he's working for the Williams team, which doesn't get as much press and everything, but James Val was one of the architects at Braun GP when they won their one and only championship, and came out of nowhere and blew away all of the big boys. And then he stayed when it became Mercedes afterwards, and he was there for many years, and was the architect and was one of the lead architects along with Toto and the design team and everybody else at Mercedes. But he was one of those architects behind their unprecedented 8 world championships. So 8 world drivers championships, and I think it's either 8 or 9 constructors championships. So, and he was a huge part of all that before he left Mercedes to go become the top dog over at Williams. And the turnaround at Williams, a lot of that can be all put into the hands of James Val. Without James Val, Williams would not have started the long, arduous process of turning that ship around. But it's his steady hand at the helm is what has made that possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. He's been phenomenal in that role. He's had good mentors.
Yes. He's absolutely, Ross Braun, Toto Wolff. He's had some of the it's I forget, it's not Wilhelm. It starts with a W, though. I'll think of it here in a minute. Who over at Mercedes, who was instrumental on the power, on the power unit side. First of all, in getting a Mercedes into the back of the Braun when their original power unit contract fell through. They were able to take and help. Mercedes took and was able to take and help provide a ton of engineering expertise in order to help Braun fit that power unit into the back of the car and everything. And it's so it was like everybody at the Mercedes team who helped Val's along the way, who made Val's what he is, I really I'm just over the moon happy for Val's, just simply because it's well deserved. And I love to see it when somebody who works that hard and gets the results that they do. I like to see it when they get rewarded.
I do too, definitely.
All right, so let's take and talk about the Austrian Grand Prix this coming weekend. So we only got a few minutes left, but let's take and talk about it real quick. Okay, so first of all, we are heading to the Swiss Alps. We're going to the Osterring, which is it's probably not one of the most technical tracks, but it is very fast. And having driven it on the simulator, it's a fun track to drive. It really is. It's got some really nice sweeping corners, some very, very fast sections. It's always pretty much there's always a lot of drama at this track. Just look at last year, when Lando and Max came together. Now of course Lando got the the worst of it, and ended up retiring, but they came together, banged wheels, and you always get a lot of drama at Austria, and you always get a lot of unpredictability because of the weather. So this weekend could become a very, very interesting race.
Yeah, I agree.
So with that in mind, First of all, who do you think's gonna? Do you think it's gonna be another McLaren juggernaut this weekend, or do you think that Red Bull or Mercedes or maybe even Ferrari might start closing up that gap now that we've had this 2-week break since Canada?
Yeah, I think that we'll see something good from Red Bull. I mean, hopefully for them, this
Home race.
Yeah, home race and all. So I would definitely see Max up there. I'm thinking probably podium. And at this point, I don't see anything stopping McLaren. So barring some weird issue like what they had in Canada, beyond that, I don't see anything really stopping them.
So, one thing, piece of news, I'm with you that I don't think that McLaren is. I think that the handful of issues that McLaren had with some of the new parts and everything that we saw at Canada, which kept them out from securing a place on the front row during qualifying. Ended up seeing them off the podium, I think, for the first time this season. I think that was the first race that McLaren was not on the podium for the season. I'll have to take and check my notes on that. But I definitely do not see that happening again. I definitely think that one, if not both of them, will be on the podium. Now, we also got the news, though, that Alex Dunn, who is one of the up-and-coming McLaren drivers, is actually going to get to sub in for Lando during FP1. So that will be kind of interesting to get to watch. And there's a couple other drivers that are also going to get to sub in. I believe it's Drugovich is subbing in this weekend. I'll have to double check my notes on that. So if I'm wrong, don't come at me. This is all stuff that I'm pulling off the top of my head. But we're going to see a number of drivers get to participate in FP1 this time around, which is going to be interesting to finally get to see some of these these other newer drivers, finally get a chance to slot in and try their hand at a modern Formula One car and everything. So yeah. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting weekend. Should be a lot of fun, but I'm like you. I do think that, some of the gains that we saw from Ferrari, and now being buoyed by the Le Mans 24 win, I'm hoping that Ferrari will, have more of a bounce back, especially, hopefully, Lewis is not going to hit another, groundhog this time around. I think that there's much less chance of wildlife getting involved in this coming race.
Right.
So it should be a lot of fun. It should be a great race and everything. I'm really looking forward to it. And the only thing is that I need to go find. Wish they would hurry up and announce who is going to be on the grid as the commentators for Sky Sports this weekend, because if it's Danica Patrick again, I'm going to scream and throw something at my TV.
I hear you. Same.
But we should have Martin Brundle back, in the commentary. I do believe that Nico Rosberg is going to be back as one of the grid commentators. So, it should be, a fun weekend.
Nice. Awesome, man.
I think we're done.
Yeah, I think we're finished. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so it's time for us to say Auf Wiedersehen and go consume some schnapps. Join us next week when Corey and I will break down all of the action from the weekend. We'll take you for a virtual lap around the track, and we'll have more pundit stumping trivia and lots more. Also, come back later this week because, like we said at the beginning of the show, Corey and I are going to watch the F1 movie this Friday, and we're going to be posting our review of the movie shortly afterwards. So come back and check that out. So until next time, he's Corey, I'm Scott. We're the pundits of F1 Brake Check. Let's go!
Thank you for listening to F1 Brake Check. If you have enjoyed what you heard, don't miss a single episode by hitting that subscribe button in your favorite podcatcher, or you can watch the video version on YouTube. Help us grow by sharing us with your friends and fellow F1 fans. You can contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok and X at F1 Brake Check. Our website is f1brakecheck.com, where you will find links to all our content. We value your passion and your feedback, so please take a moment to review our podcast. Your reviews help us grow and improve, and it means the world to us. Share your thoughts, rate us, and let us know how we can make the show experience even better. F1 Brake Check is a production of Brake Check Media. For your hosts Scott Vick and Corey Broom, until next time, keep yourself inside track limits, and try not to pitch it in the kitty litter.